They don't want us wearing symbols of faith. Not when we look like her. The words whispered in the gallery echoed through Celeste Morgan's mind as she stood alone before the towering bench. Judge Eleanor Prescott's icy stare met hers. The silver-haired jurist sitting high above in a sea of black robes. The courtroom buzzed, packed with reporters, cameras, and silent tension. Celeste stood tall, dressed in a sharp black suit that hugged her frame with elegance. But the real flashpoint wasn't her sharp mind. It was the small gold cross that gleamed softly against her dark skin, resting just above her collarbone. A simple inheritance from her grandmother, who had marched in Selma with it around her neck. Miss Morgan. The voice sliced through the air, sharp and cold. This court has a strict no religious symbols policy. Remove that cross immediately. A ripple ran through the gallery. Reporters leaned in, pens ready. Celeste's fingers instinctively brushed the cross. Your Honor, with all due respect. Bang! The gavel struck. This is not a church. It is my courtroom. Remove it, or I will hold you in contempt. Across the room, Elena Rodriguez smirked, her voice dripping with mockery. Looks like the civil rights darling thinks she's above the rules. $500 fine, the judge snapped. Pay it now, or it's jail. Celeste's lips curled into a calm, deliberate smile. Before you fine me, she began, voice steady as stone. Perhaps you should review Lynch versus Donnelly, 1984. The court ruled that religious displays in public spaces are constitutional if part of a broader historical tradition. She let the weight of her words hang in the air. And since this very courthouse keeps the 10 Commandments etched in marble in the lobby, gasps filled the room. Reporters jolted. Cameras flashed. Judge Prescott stiffened. Rodriguez sprang to her feet. Objection. Overruled. Came the judge's taut reply, color draining from her face. Celeste leaned forward, voice a whisper but razor sharp. And if you pursue this fine, I will file a First Amendment lawsuit so fast your gavel won't touch the desk before it hits national news. A booming voice interrupted from the back. She is absolutely correct. All heads turned as Senator Marcus Harlan strode into the courtroom, a leather-bound law book in hand. And if this court ignores precedent, his voice thundered, I will read the entire opinion into the congressional record myself. Judge Prescott's jaw clenched. Celeste adjusted her cross, eyes locking with Rodriguez. Round one belongs to us, Marcus whispered. The gavel slammed. Court adjourned for 1 hour. The judge barked, retreating in haste. As the courtroom burst into chaos, reporters rushed Celeste. Did you plan this? Is Senator Harlan part of your legal team? She smoothed her dress, gaze unflinching. Took you long enough, she murmured to Marcus with a half-smile. Across the room, Elena Rodriguez hissed. This isn't over, Morgan. It never is, Celeste replied. And the battle for far more than a simple cross had just begun. The heavy oak door to Judge Prescott's chambers creaked open. The scent of old books and stale coffee greeted Celeste Morgan as she stepped inside, Senator Marcus Harlan shadowing her with measured steps. Moments later, Elena Rodriguez entered, heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. The room felt older than justice itself, shelves crammed with dusty volumes, a single window framing the growing crowd of protesters gathering on the courthouse steps. Judge Prescott stood by the window, her back turned. For a long beat, silence hung thick in the air. Then her voice, brittle and cold. Miss Morgan, you think you're clever. Celeste remained silent, face unreadable. Prescott finally turned, and for the first time today, she looked worn. Here's the real problem. With a flick of her wrist, she tossed a thin file onto her desk. Its contents fanned open. A photo of Celeste, 3 weeks prior, shaking hands with a prominent black conservative donor at a private fundraiser. You're not here for religious freedom. The judge's voice dropped low. You're here to make a spectacle, to embarrass this court. And me. From the corner, Elena Rodriguez smirked, arms crossed. But Celeste didn't flinch. Marcus Harlan stepped forward. With respect, Your Honor. Respect. Prescott's voice cracked like a whip. You storm into my courtroom, turn a simple hearing into a media circus, and now you want to talk about respect? She leaned across the desk, eyes narrowing. I could bury both of you in motions and sanctions until this entire case crumbles into dust. The air went still, then soft, deliberate. Celeste laughed, a sound as cold as marble. Before you threaten us, Your Honor, she said, reaching into her blazer. You may want to read this first. With practiced calm, she unfolded a single sheet of paper and laid it on the desk. Judge Prescott snatched it, eyes scanning the page. Color drained from her face. Rodriguez darted forward. What is it? No reply. Where did you get this? The judge whispered, her voice suddenly fragile. Celeste's smile was razor thin. Does it matter? Her hands trembled. No one dared breathe. Rodriguez slammed a palm on the desk. This doesn't change the fact that she's manipulating this court. Without turning, Celeste replied, or maybe you just hate getting outplayed. At last, Judge Prescott looked up, voice hollow. This changes things. She turned toward Rodriguez. Elena, leave us. Rodriguez recoiled. What? But, now. The door clicked shut behind her, her furious footsteps fading. Prescott collapsed into her chair, crumpling the memo in her grip. Marcus crossed his arms, voice low. Told you she'd fold. But Celeste kept her eyes locked on the judge. You recognize the signature, don't you? Prescott's throat worked. This memo, it's from Chief Justice Roberts, dated 2 days ago. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. He agrees with you. Celeste leaned in, her voice velvet and steel. Now you have a choice. Dismiss the fine and let this go. Or I release this to the press. Pause. And trust me, the headlines won't be kind to Judge defies Supreme Court. The judge's chair creaked. For the first time all day, she looked her full 68 years and more. You wouldn't. Celeste tilted her head, smile unwavering. Try me. Outside, the chants of protesters rose to a fever pitch. Somewhere, a phone rang shrilly in the distance. Judge Prescott closed her eyes. Fine. The penalty is withdrawn. Celeste nodded once, straightening. But as she turned to go, the judge's voice stopped her cold. One more thing. Celeste paused, hand on the door. This isn't over. And Celeste knew exactly who the judge meant. Somewhere out there, Elena Rodriguez was already on the phone, and the real fight had only just begun. The crowd on the courthouse steps had swelled into a throng by the time Celeste Morgan reached the second-floor window. She stood in silence, arms folded, watching as waves of protesters surged below. Some waving signs for religious freedom, others denouncing corruption. Beside her, Senator Marcus Harlan flipped through the Chief Justice's memo, brows furrowed. This changes everything, he muttered. If Roberts is signaling support for religious displays in courtrooms, we just rewrote the rulebook. Celeste's gaze remained locked on the scene outside, her reflection faint against the glass. The rulebook never mattered to them, she said softly. Only the power to enforce it. A sharp knock interrupted the moment. A young black intern slipped inside, face pale. Miss Morgan, you need to see this. She crossed the room quickly. The corner television flickered to life, the CNN breaking news banner screaming across the screen. There stood Elena Rodriguez, flanked by Senator Elizabeth Warren and ACLU Legal Director David Cole, fire blazing in her eyes. A blatant attempt to bully the judiciary, Rodriguez declared, voice quivering with righteous fury. But we have proof this so-called memo is a fake. Screen split, showing a grainy security still. Celeste entering the Supreme Court building 3 hours before the memo was dated. Celeste's stomach twisted. Senator Warren leaned into the mic. This isn't about religious freedom. It's about fraud. Marcus's phone buzzed violently. He glanced at it, going very still. Celeste, Fox News just got leaked emails between you and Roberts's clerk. Her breath caught. The room seemed to tilt. On the screen, Rodriguez's voice rang out. We're filing ethics charges first thing tomorrow. Celeste's fingers gripped the windowsill until her knuckles whitened. This wasn't just a loss. It was annihilation. Her phone vibrated. Unknown number. A single text. You need an exit. Meet me at Lincoln Park in 20 minutes. No signature. Just a single emoji. Lincoln Park at midnight was bone cold and eerily still. Leafless trees clawed at the black sky as Celeste paced near the statue of Lincoln. Each snap of a twig felt like a threat. A shadow emerged beneath the street lamp. Justice Clarence Thomas stepped into the light, face unreadable. "You shouldn't have come alone," he said. Celeste's pulse pounded. "You texted me." Thomas gave no reply. Instead, he drew an envelope from his coat and pressed it into her hands. "Rodriguez is lying. The emails are doctored." Inside, what appeared to be a series of heated exchanges, not between Celeste and Roberts' clerk, but between the clerk and Rodriguez herself. Celeste's hands shook. This proves she fabricated the scandal. "But why show me?" Thomas's smile was thin and weary. "Because Roberts won't, and Harlan can't." His voice lowered to a warning. "They're coming for all of us." A car door slammed nearby. Thomas vanished into the shadows as 3 Capitol Police officers appeared beneath the street lamp. "Celeste Morgan," the lead officer said, hand resting on his holster. "The Senate Judiciary Committee wants you now." The unmarked Capitol Police SUV tore through DC's empty streets, sirens off, lights flashing. Celeste clutched the envelope so tightly the edges cut into her palm. "Committee wants to talk at 1 a.m.? She demanded. The officer beside her stared ahead. Special session. They weren't headed to the Senate. The SUV veered into a nondescript underground garage beneath the Library of Congress. Fluorescent lights flickered as guards escorted her down a narrow hall lined with armed men. A steel door hissed open. Inside a windowless room, Senator Lindsey Graham waited beneath buzzing lights, expression grim. "Sit down, Celeste." She remained standing. "Where's Harlan?" Graham's smile was brittle. "Busy explaining why he helped you fake a Supreme Court memo." Her blood ran cold. "It's not fake. Thomas just gave me." Graham slammed his chair back. "Clarence Thomas hasn't left his house in 3 days." The envelope now burned in her grip. Graham slid a tablet across the table. On screen, footage of a man in a Clarence Thomas mask handing her the envelope. "Rodriguez set you up again." Her phone buzzed. CNN alert. "Chief Justice Roberts orders emergency review of forged correspondence." Graham leaned in. "You've got 1 play left. Give me the whistleblower behind this, or you'll be disbarred by dawn." The door burst open. An aide whispered frantically in Graham's ear. His face blanched. "God help us all." He spun the tablet toward her. Live footage. A mob of protesters storming the Supreme Court building, led by Rodriguez, waving a copy of the fake memo. Celeste lunged for the tablet, fingers smudging the screen. "Those aren't protesters," she gasped. "That's a raid." The live feed on the tablet trembled as the mob surged past marble pillars inside the Supreme Court. Elena Rodriguez, front and center, brandished a copy of the forged memo, her voice rising above the chaos. "The people demand justice." Behind her, black-clad figures shoved past guards. Glass shattered. Alarms screamed. Celeste Morgan's heart pounded as she zoomed in on the screen. "Those aren't protesters," she whispered. Her voice cut through the room. "That's a raid." Senator Lindsey Graham's phone rang. He answered, putting it on speaker. A panicked voice crackled through. "They're tearing apart Roberts' chambers." A gunshot rang out through the speakers. The live feed cut to black. Without hesitation, Celeste shot to her feet. "We need Air Force One now." Graham grabbed her arm, eyes blazing. "You don't understand. The president's already signed an executive order." He swallowed hard. "The courts are being dissolved. Pending investigation." The words hung in the air like poison. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Emergency bulbs flashed red. Steel doors slammed shut somewhere in the building. "They're locking us in," Graham's aide screamed. Celeste yanked out her phone. 1 bar of signal. With trembling fingers, she sent a single text. Not to Marcus Harlan, not to Justice Thomas, but to the one number she'd vowed never to use. The reply came instantly. Marine 1 on the roof. 90 seconds. Bring the envelope. Graham's eyes widened in disbelief. You're working with him. Before he could say more, a thunderous boom shook the walls. Dust rained from the ceiling. Celeste sprinted for the stairs. The envelope pressed hard against her ribs. She never looked back. The rooftop wind lashed her face as she emerged into the night. Marine 1's blades churned the air into a storm. She shielded her eyes, stumbling toward the waiting chopper. The figure leaned out, arm extended. Not the one she'd expected. Not Marcus. Not Thomas. But a man in a wrinkled suit and familiar grim smile. Retired General Nathaniel Cross. You're late, he shouted over the deafening roar. Celeste gripped his arm as he hauled her aboard. Her hair whipped wildly in the wind. You set this whole thing up, she accused, voice hoarse. Cross strapped her in as the helicopter pitched skyward. Below, the Capitol was ablaze with spotlights and chaos. Wrong, he replied curtly, tossing her a tablet. The screen displayed a classified Pentagon alert. Operation Scales authorization revoked. Stand down all units. His voice turned grave. Someone hijacked the op. This was supposed to be a fake raid, just enough to scare Roberts into retirement. He met her eyes. But that mob? Half foreign operatives, the rest, radical agitators Rodriguez couldn't control. Celeste's mind raced. Then who's running this now? The pilot screamed from the cockpit. Missile lock! Alarms blared. A red warning light flashed on the dash. A streak of fire shot up from the Lincoln Memorial. In a heartbeat, Celeste acted. She tore open the envelope. Dozens, hundreds of pages burst into the night, caught by the chopper's downdraft. The missile's trajectory shifted wildly, chasing the swirling cloud of evidence. A blinding explosion lit the sky beneath them. Cross stared at her, stunned. What the hell was in there? Celeste watched the inferno below, voice steady. Every dirty secret Roberts ever buried. From the chopper, they saw the blast illuminate the National Mall, documents raining down like a paper storm. On the ground, protesters, reporters, even tourists scrambled to snatch them up. Phones flashed everywhere. CNN's live broadcast cut to chaotic footage of civilians reading the exposed documents. Cross's radio crackled. The president is invoking the 25th Amendment. They're arresting Rodriguez at the Capitol. Celeste's gaze stayed locked on the screens. TikTok videos showed protesters reading out Roberts' secret memos, some outlining election manipulation. Fox News anchor's voice rang out. Breaking news, FBI director resigns mid-broadcast. On the White House lawn, a Marine guard picked up a single sheet of paper and saluted the camera. Cross turned to Celeste, eyes wide. You knew this would happen. Finally, she allowed herself a thin smile. I counted on it. Marine 1 banked hard toward Andrews Air Force Base. Below them, the streets of D.C. churned like a disturbed anthill. Her phone buzzed. One last message, from an unlisted number. The game was rigged from the start, but you played well. See you in Moscow. Cross grabbed the device. What the? The screen went black. One word flashing in red. Checkmate. Celeste leaned back in her seat as the chopper vanished into the clouds, watching as America burned beneath them. Marine 1 cut through the night sky, the distant glow of Washington burning beneath the clouds. Inside, Celeste Morgan sat in tense silence, her pulse steady now, too steady. Below them, chaos unfurled across the nation's capital. On the helicopter screen, a barrage of live footage streamed in, frantic news anchors, viral TikTok videos, stunned pundits. What you unleashed tonight, General Nathaniel Cross said grimly, can't be undone. Celeste didn't respond. She watched as one video showed college students on the National Mall, reading the leaked Roberts memos aloud. Evidence of coordinated judicial manipulation in key civil rights cases. A reporter's voice shook. This may trigger a full federal investigation and possibly impeachment of multiple Supreme Court justices. Cross turned from the cockpit. Rodriguez is already in custody. But that won't stop what's coming. He handed Celeste a new encrypted phone. From this point on, you use this only. Understand? She accepted it without a word. Another alert flashed across the screen. White House press secretary at the podium. By order of the president, a temporary judicial oversight committee will assume review of all high court decisions effective immediately. Cross exhaled heavily. Martial law for the judiciary, he muttered. That was never part of the plan. Celeste's voice was cold steel. Neither was betrayal. She replayed the text in her mind. See you in Moscow. Another chess piece revealed itself. Foreign actors seeded this entire operation, Cross said. We thought we could control it. We were wrong. A new feed appeared. UN Security Council emergency session underway. Ambassadors shouting. Fingers pointed toward US representatives. A Russian diplomat sneered. It seems your democracy is crumbling from within. Cross leaned forward. We have one shot to contain this. Celeste finally spoke, voice low but certain. We let the truth burn through first. On the screen, another clip rolled. A black Marine in full dress uniform picking up a page from the White House lawn, holding it high for cameras. We, the people, deserve the truth, he declared. Across America, the chant began. Show us the truth. Show us the truth. Cross met Celeste's gaze. You knew it would come to this. She gave the faintest nod. I counted on it. Another encrypted message blinked onto the new phone. Celeste opened it carefully. You've won the board. Now guard the pieces. Stay alive. No signature. She leaned back in her seat. Outside, dawn began to break. A blood-red sun rising over a nation in turmoil. And somewhere far below, forces older than the Constitution had just been dragged into the light. The rotor blades slowed as Marine One touched down at Andrews Air Force Base. Celeste Morgan remained motionless, eyes fixed on the tablet in her lap. Across the screen, breaking headlines cascaded like a tidal wave. Roberts' memos confirmed authentic. Full-scale federal investigation underway. Rodriguez faces multiple felony charges. A final clip showed Senator Marcus Harlan, flanked by aides, addressing the nation. Let this serve as a reminder. No institution is above the law. General Nathaniel Cross unbuckled his harness. We'll get you to a safe house. But Celeste didn't move. Her gaze lingered on the last message. See you in Moscow. I'm not running, she said quietly. Cross frowned. You've burned half of DC tonight. They will come for you. Celeste finally looked up. Let them. If we bow now, they win. Footsteps approached. An Air Force major handed Cross a secure file. He skimmed it, face darkening. The Russians seeded the initial memo leak weeks ago. Rodriguez was their pawn, and the operation was bigger than we thought. Celeste's voice remained steady. Then it's not over. Outside, the first rays of dawn broke over the airfield. Cross handed her a small encrypted drive. Every surviving file from the Roberts archive. Make sure the right people see it. She accepted it, tucking it into her jacket. You'll be watched from here on out, he warned. Celeste offered a faint smile. I've been watched my whole life, General. It never stopped me before. As she descended the steps of the chopper, cameras zoomed in from across the base perimeter. A lone reporter shouted, Miss Morgan, do you regret what you did tonight? Celeste paused, turned to face the cameras. Her voice carried across the tarmac. I regret that it had to be done this way, but not that it was done. Flashbulbs erupted. Somewhere in the distance, a fighter jet streaked across the dawn sky. Back inside the helicopter, Cross's phone buzzed. An untraceable message appeared on screen. Checkmate was never the end. The next board is already set. Cross looked up sharply. But Celeste was already walking into the light, silhouette framed against the rising sun. And though the Capitol still burned behind her, she carried the one weapon no regime could suppress. The truth.